Morning, everybody. Welcome back. Time for another episode of Corey Hughes' Bloody History. Sorry I took last week off. Kind of needed it. I had a lot going on. Plus, I wrote an article for Garrison magazine that will be coming out, I don't know, in the next couple months. But I'm back. And so I came across a document in Harold Weisberg's collection on Jack Ruby, and it was titled basically Ruby 1964, and it is supposed to be a chronology of information that came out in 1964, along with, I think, some of the things Ruby had done. It's basically the chronology of 64 to encompass everything that was coming out at trial and everything that was going on with Jack Ruby. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. There's some interesting little tidbits in here, so I figured we'd go through it. Should be able to get through it all today. All right, Ruby 64, early chronology. The torch is passed, 82 to 88. I don't know what the fuck that means, but that's the heading. 164, it was 11:16 a.m., He walked down Main and paused before the entrance to the underground garage. A single policeman stood watch. A squad car rolled up the ramp and stopped. A policeman on watch went over to talk to the man in the car. Unnoticed, Jack Ruby, a freelance Avenger, walked past them and down the ramp into the basement of the building. That's from the Associated Press. The torch is passed with no attribution. That's complete bullshit, by the way. That can't be what happened. That can't be what happened. They're not going to cover any of this in this document here, so I might as well tell you that Jack Ruby was let into the basement of the garage by George Butler. And if you research George Butler, he's his oldest and longest friend in Dallas. He had him as a friend for about 15 years at that point. He was the head of the policemen's union. And Jack Ruby was seen down in the basement at like 9 o'clock in the fucking morning in an elevator. So Jack Ruby got there early. George Butler let him in. And that precludes him from having purchased the money orders, right? So who could have possibly purchased the money orders and then had them slipped into Jack Ruby's property, much like they did with Oswald and his transfer slips, because Oswald was never on the bus, never got the transfer slips, but they mysteriously appeared in his property 2 hours after he was arrested, right? After he'd been searched numerous times. Such is the case with Jack Ruby and the money orders that he was sending to Little Lynn. And Little Lynn, this is an interesting one, and we'll get to this on another episode of the podcast, but Little Lynn was a stripper for him, and he sent her the money to Fort Worth, but her man is the one who's really important, right? Carlin was the last name. Shit, what the fuck was his first name? I forget. Bruce Carlin? Was it Bruce Carlin? Perhaps. But we'll get to him. But that motherfucker, when everyone else is driving around Texas that weekend of the assassination, so was Bruce Carlin. I'm pretty sure that's his name. So everybody's driving around fucking Texas, and he's one of these people who's shooting from Louisiana to fucking Houston to Dallas and all the fuck over the place. And why? Who knows? He was probably shuttling people around, but I never really got to that as part of my research because it was kind of an afterthought. So, but we will be getting to it here on this podcast at some point. Moving on here. January of 64, page 20 to 22. I don't know what document they're referring to. After an account of Ruby's shooting of Oswald. But I'm assuming that anytime we see a page number reference, it'll be to the same document. Perhaps transcripts of the trial. Much remains to be known of the relationship between the two men, but what we do know indicates that Oswald was murdered, not in a flush of patriotic fervor or mad rage, but in the cool, calculating manner of the professional killer. The bullet that tore into Lee Oswald seems to have been intended not to punish, but to silence him. It's from The Minority of One, page 16 to 23, by Eric Norden. And this was compiled by Harold Weisberg, just to reiterate. January 7th, 64... Dallas. District Attorney Henry Wade said today that an intensive investigation showed no evidence whatever of any collusion between Jack Ruby and Dallas police officers in the slaying of Lee Oswald. Mr. Wade made the statement after he received a report prepared by an investigating board that had been appointed by Police Chief Jesse Curry. He said a copy of the report had been sent to the Warren Commission, New York Times, special to New York Times. 12064. Dallas FBI agent C. Ray Hall, last witness of the day, testified that Ruby had also told him of going to Cuba to try to sell Jeeps, using a plane ticket sent to him by a person the state described as someone in Cuba. It's from the Associated Press, James W. Mangan, 1:54 p.m. 12164, Dallas. Ruby denied bond, returned to cell to await further psychiatric examinations. The 2 days of testimony brought out that Ruby once made a trip to Cuba, allegedly in an attempt to sell surplus GI equipment to the Castro government, then in favor of the United States. Questioned about that by newsmen today, Ruby said it was only a vacation trip and that he was quizzed by Cuban intelligence men about his motive. Quote, I wanted to get out of the beer business, but I have never been a person looking for a fast buck, the slightly nervous, well-dressed Ruby said. I had no motive. I was on vacation. Under the barrage of questions, the bright lights of the cameras, Ruby broke down and wept. His lawyers then asked that all questioning stop. 12564, Dallas. A source close to the prosecution says, quote, Ruby is a class-conscious nobody who saw an opportunity to do something that would put him in the public eye and even make him a hero. He wasn't insane, he was rational, but he figured wrong. He's not a hero, he's a heel because of fouling up history. These takes that they had back in 64 are just hilarious. The guys still remember the 1927 Dempsey-Tunney fight, mostly for the guys who got in free. Sparky was one. Sparky's a nickname for Jack Rubenstein back when he was in Chicago, hanging out with Dave Yaris and Lenny Patrick. Two men who were up on the grassy knoll at the time of the assassination. We snuck in all right, says Benny Barish, now a liquor salesman from San Francisco. Quote, but that story about Sparky having a metal plate in his head because a cop clobbered him with a nightstick is bunk. A cop did throw a stick, but he didn't hit anyone. That's funny. As an Army Air Force mechanic, he saw service at 5 camps. Keesler Field, Missouri. Seymour Johnson Field, South Carolina, where he qualified as a sharpshooter with a carbine. Blumenthal Field, North Carolina. Catham Field, Georgia. And Drew Field, Florida. Mustered out in 1946, changed his name legally from Jack Rubenstein to Jack Leon Ruby in 1948. Just to those of you who think that Jack Ruby's story about assuming the middle name Leon because a buddy of his named, what was his name, Leon Forsman? Was that him? I don't recall exactly. It might be. He assumed that middle name Leon because of his friend who got killed, right? But I think that story's complete bullshit because when you fucking start seeing enough middle names being adopted like Leon and Wayne, which you'll see all the fuck over the place, you start to come to realize that these adopted middle names are rankings of some sort. They mean something within mob circles, like David Leon Miller, right? Or David Wayne House. Jack Leon Ruby. Dave Leon Yaris. Yeah. Leon ain't that fucking popular of a name. It's got to be a title that's assumed at some point. And even fucking... It's funny because even Ryan Dawson asked me one time. He's like, have you figured out the assumed names thing yet? And I was like, you mean like Wayne and Leon? And he laughed. So I'm pretty sure I was right about that. Ruby was no stool pigeon, but he was a damn good about tipping the cops about drunks and police characters, says a well-informed source in the district attorney's office. AP, Jack Ruby by Bernard Gavzer. 12864, Dallas. Ruby taken to clinic for mental tests. Meanwhile, the FBI permitted Wade and his assistants to view the FBI files on the shooting of Oswald by Ruby. Wade, for some time, had been balked in his efforts to view this evidence. It was believed the state's officers were studying only the section of the report relating to the slaying of Oswald, and were not allowed to see the FBI's report on the assassination of President Kennedy. AP 5:50 p.m. by Clayton Hickerson. 2964, a witness said he had seen Tippett, Bernard Weissman, and Ruby conferring for about 2 hours in Ruby's nightclub on 11/14. You know, something that interests me. It has to do with the assassination for sure because Tippett was in on it, right? The whole bus stop incident was proof of that. But yeah, that's an interesting one. So, Jim and Ergo, let's pull some information on this incident with Tippett, Bernard Weissman, and Ruby. 21064, Dallas, Jack Ruby, tremulously says that reading the Bible in jail has given him a new view of life. 21264, Dallas, attorney Melvin Belli said a newspaper story about a brain test performed on Ruby was part of a plot, a high-level conspiracy in Dallas to cheat Ruby of justice. Called the story a deliberate lie. The reporter who wrote the story, Carl Freund, of the Dallas Morning News, said he obtained the information that the test showed no important damage to Ruby's brain from a usually important source, which he did not reveal despite Belli's insistence. He added that he would be glad to publish a story on Belli's knowledge of the results of the test on Ruby. It's from Raymond Holbrook. 21364, in the last series of syndicated articles by Ruby, written with the assistance of reporter William Reed Woodfield, the admitted executioner concluded Oswald was a dead man before I shot him. Ruby said he murdered Oswald after Dallas District Attorney Henry Wade stated that Oswald was guilty of killing Kennedy, indicating that he would not have done so had Wade not made his accusation. That's from the National Guardian. 21764, Dallas. The state contends that Ruby was completely sane when he shot Oswald. Homicide Police Captain Will Fritz and Officer James Lavelle, who was handcuffed to Oswald when Ruby shot him, have testified that Ruby looked calm at that moment. In a series of ghost-written articles under Ruby's name, the accused man said, quote, "No one knew I was going to shoot Oswald, not even me. No one helped me or gave me access. I didn't do it intentionally. I didn't even know I had done it." And that's from the Associated Press. That's total bullshit. I mean, obviously, he got the call from Al Gruber, or he called Al Gruber. Al Gruber gives him the order. Obviously, from the fucking Israelis, the connection through Mickey Cohen, who's in jail at that point, right? So there's one connection there. There's one indicator that he fucking told him to kill Oswald at that point, because that was right after Oswald got arrested. And then George Butler lets him in 9 o'clock in the fucking morning. And then who is it who's got the money order? It's obviously Samuel Ruby, who then had the money order slipped into any one of a number of cops who were there to get it into Jack's property. So that's the series of events that happened that morning. So all these statements are just bunk. 21864, Dallas. The psychiatric report on Jack L. Ruby, prepared by doctors appointed the judge, discloses that Ruby had experienced recurrent spells in recent years. The report, not yet made public by Judge Joe B. Brown, states that these periods lasted for intervals of 30 to 40 seconds and produced feelings of pressure within Ruby's head. "I feel as though my head is cracking up," Ruby told the physicians who examined him. On the basis of a medical examination, neurological tests given to him last month, Dr. Martin L. Towler, a neurologist at the University of Texas, concluded that Ruby was suffering from a seizure disorder. Dr. Robert Stubblefield and Dr. John Holbrook, a psychiatrist who had testified for the prosecution that Ruby was sane, also witnessed the tests. In letters to Dr. Towles, neither of the two psychiatrists took exception to the methods used to test Ruby. As reported earlier, the electroencephalographic tests given Ruby last month have been interpreted by a Chicago authority on epilepsy as demonstrating that Ruby suffers from a rare type of that disease. Bullshit. Dr. Frederick A. Gibbs wrote to Dr. Towler after examining the chartings of Ruby's brainwave. Quote, "The two electroencephalographic recordings you have sent me, which were made in your laboratory on Jack Ruby, both show seizure disorders of the psychomotor variant type." New York Times, Jack Languth. 22764, report on article by Dorothy Kilgallen in the New York Journal American, 221. And I get this fucking question all the time. Who killed Dorothy Kilgallen? Who killed Dorothy Kilgallen? Menachem Begin and his henchman Frank, I forget his last name, fucking killed Dorothy Kilgallen. There you go. Dorothy Kilgallen wrote from Dallas that the FBI had made a deal with lawyers defending Jack Ruby that provides Ruby's side with reams of helpful information that they would never have been able to get without the G-men, on the condition that they do not ask for anything at all about Ruby's alleged victim. Her story, apparently written after a talk with Ruby's lawyers, noted that it appears Washington knows or suspects something about Lee Oswald that it does not want Dallas and the rest of the world to know or suspect. Ms. Kilgallen names Assistant Attorney General Herbert Miller as the person who responded to the request of Ruby's lawyers. Why is Oswald being kept in the shadows as dim figure as they can make him, while the defense tries to recuse his alleged killer with the help of information from the FBI? Jack Smith, National Guardian. 22764 report on article by Augusto Marcelli, correspondent for Italian magazine L'Europa, quotes Marcelli on Ruby's past connections with underworld and gambling figures. Marcelli and Ruby also informer for FBI, National Guardian Jack Smith. 364, a couple of years ago, there was an article in Adam, a raunchy girly magazine, about amateur night for strippers at Ruby's nightclub. Quote, amateur night proved an immediate hit with the carousel's audience. Many times the erotic enthusiasm of the spectators seemed exceeded only by the impish delight of the amateur performers. Hot and breathless from the experience of baring their bodies for the first time before an audience, these wild cheers of amateur night spectators indicate they feel they're getting their $2 worth, which is a cover charge. Many of the luckier males get an added bonus when the girls who are encouraged by the club to mix with the customers accept an invitation to have a drink. The club serves beer and setups. The most of the customers bring their own bottles. The club caters to large stag groups, especially college students and oil or cattle conventioneers. Most of the amateurs pack the audience with an admiring throng of their boyfriends to cheer for them. In fact, manager Ruby observed many of the girls perform an amateur night under the urging of their boyfriends, who claim they see a lot more of them on our stage than they do on a date. God damn, what a different time it was back then. Thus spake the avenger of our president, the realist, Paul Krasner, Confessions of a Guilty Bystander, page 4. 364, and in the excitement of his sorrow, one man reached the sublime. Jack Ruby, journalistically returning to the scene of the crime, explained in syndicated apologia, quote, suddenly there was a great commotion, and out of there walked Oswald. He was about 10 feet from me. He came out all of a sudden with a smirky, defiant, cursing, vicious, communist expression on his face. I'm not making it up, I swear. This series, incidentally, was supposed to have been written for a German publication with the subsequent embargo on it in this country. But, well, they plead temporary greed. The realist, Paul Krasner, Confessions of a Guilty Bystander, page 4. Is fucking hilarious. 3364, Dallas. The state suggested today that Jack Ruby may have been on Lee Harvey Oswald's trial some 20 hours before he shot to death the accused assassin of President Kennedy. Okay, so obviously that's false. What they're referencing is all those times that Jack Ruby made it onto fucking television, right? At the midnight press conference and at the fucking hallway of the police station and all that stuff. He also happened to be in the background of the Dallas Morning News, and he makes it on TV 4 times in 24 hours. 4 fucking times. And plus the fucking Oswald shooting. 4 times, then the Oswald shooting. It's fucking hilarious. And then, but was he trying to stalk Oswald? No, he was not stalking Oswald looking for an opportunity. That's complete bullshit. What he was doing was getting on television. He was creating an alibi because that was Samuel Ruby creating an alibi for his brother Jack Ruby, who went to Galveston to return Andrew Jerome Blackman to his boat. And then they have the whole bouncing back and forth in the fucking game with the Alamo Motel and all that stuff I don't want to get into. So yeah, Samuel Ruby is the fucking man who was on TV all those times, not Jack Ruby. Jack doesn't show up on TV until he actually shoots Oswald. And all the footage of him shooting Oswald sucks, by the way, right? It's terrible. It's terrible. 2 witnesses placed Ruby outside Dallas County Jail when a crowd gathered mid-afternoon, 11:23, in anticipation of Oswald's transfer there from police headquarters. First witness was Sergeant D.V. Harkness. Testified Ruby did not act unlike the rest of the crowd. Earlier, another witness, Wes Wise, newsman for KRLD. Wes Wise also inextricably linked to the reporting of the sighting of Oswald at Mac Pate's garage. But that's a whole nother story. Earlier, another witness, Wes Wise, newsman for KRLD, radio and television in Dallas, told of seeing Ruby in the vicinity of the county jail the afternoon after Kennedy's assassination. Wise said he discussed with Ruby the fact that 2 small Western saddles intended as gifts for the Kennedy children were left behind in Dallas after the assassination. He said he saw tears in Ruby's eyes, that Ruby was touched. In line with the possibility that Ruby was keeping track of Oswald movements before the shooting, the state called, should be moments before the shooting, Weisberg, the state called to the witness stand Garnet Claude Hallmark, manager of an auto parking concession near Ruby's downtown strip joint. He testified about 2:50 p.m. Saturday, 11:23. Ruby made a phone call to Wise. Let's pull up Jack Ruby's timeline. I know there's at least 2 different sets of PDFs of Jack Ruby's timeline from the 20th to the 24th. Let's see if we can't pull those. I'm gonna have to go through those at some point. Might as well do it now. Did he say anything with reference to the movement of Oswald from the city to county jail? There was a conversation about the almost immediate transfer. Did he say he would be there? Yes, he said he would be there. Under cross-examination about the telephone call, Hallmark testified, quote, "It appeared to me he had some information on this transfer and simply wanted to corroborate it." Another witness, Doyle Lane, a Western Union supervisor, told Ruby sending $25 money order to Karen Lynn Bennett. Bennett, that's it. Not Barnett, Bennett. A 19-year-old stripper who had worked for Ruby. The receipt for the money order to Fort Worth was stamped 11:17 a.m. Sunday, 11:24, about 3 minutes before the shooting of Oswald. 3364 Dallas. The defense has contended in questioning prospective jurors that Ruby habitually carried a gun because he went about with large amounts of money on his person. Later, Lavelle testified that after Ruby's arrest, he was found carrying $2,015.33. 3364 Dallas. Doyle Lane, Western Union supervisor, told of Ruby sending $25 money order to Karen Lynn Bennett. God damn it, why do they do this? They duplicate stuff in here all the time. All right, so the first paragraph is duplicated. Then it says, Lane said Ruby took his receipt, went out the office, and turned left in the direction of police headquarters. Did he walk out of there leisurely? Belli asked. Yes. Was there nothing unusual about his walk? No, sir. Okay, so the reason they're asking about Jack Ruby and how he left the Western Union where he got the money order for Karen Lynn Bennett, Little Lynn. Little Lynn's photographed in Dealey Plaza, okay? Just so you fucking know. She's there too. So I don't know what the fuck. I mean, this is 2 days later, yeah. But she was there in Dealey Plaza. She's not reported to have been there, but the photographs are fucking sure enough of her with her big old tall white fucking hair. The receipt for the money order to Fort Worth was stamped 11/17. Okay, so they're asking about this stuff because they want to see what was Ruby's demeanor. Meaning, was he calm when he bought the money order? Of course he was calm when he bought the money order, because they're trying to make a connection here that there has to be some sort of correlation between the timing of the delivery of the money order and the shooting, which is not the case, right? So he could have shot fucking Oswald, and then they slipped the money order in 2 hours later, right? So there's no correlation at all between the time of the purchasing of the money order by Samuel Ruby and the time at which it was delivered to Jack Ruby's property, right? Totally have nothing to do with each other. Could have been done 2-3 hours. Could have been done the next morning, and they retroactively altered the paperwork. We just don't fucking know. But it didn't have to get there within the next 3 minutes, is the point I'm making. 3464 Dallas. It was suggested through state testimony today that Ruby may have trailed out. They duplicated this again. Oh, I see what he's doing here. So when he duplicates something like this, he then adds some notes to it underneath. On November 22nd, Ruby at midnight press conference, police headquarters. November 23rd, Ruby made a telephone call at 2:50 p.m. to Wes Wise, newsman KRLD, about Oswald's transfer to county jail. So Ruby called Wes Wise. Interesting. It's just such a small group of people. I mean, Dallas is a city of millions of people, but the same fucking couple names who all know each other seem to still pop up in the story here. Ruby outside county jail with crowd waiting for Oswald transfer. Testimony of D.V. Harkness and Wes Wise. Ruby was seen Saturday afternoon in the crowded third floor corridor through which Oswald was led for interrogation. Yeah, no, that was Samuel Ruby. 11:24. Ruby outside police headquarters sometime after 10:30 a.m. Twice approached Ira M. Walker, engineering technician. Okay, so Samuel did more than just fucking buy the money order, because once you accept the fact that Jack Ruby was in police basement by 9 o'clock in the fucking morning, he's not going to leave again. He's not going to leave again and then try to get back in. No, he's in there the whole time. So any conversations that Ruby had or observations of Ruby after 9 o'clock in the morning that were outside of police headquarters is motherfucking Samuel Ruby, not Jack Ruby. Okay? 3464 Dallas. John Rutledge, police reporter for Dallas Morning News, described how Ruby passed through police guards in the police station on the night of the presidential assassination. He said guards were keeping everyone out of the crowded corridor leading to an office where Oswald was being questioned. Rutledge said Jack walked in between two out-of-state reporters. He said the two reporters were wearing large Kennedy press cards. He said Ruby was writing on a piece of paper, as would a reporter. Wade asked if anyone challenged Ruby. Rutledge replied that a detective called, "What are you doing here?" I'm helping these reporters, Rutledge said. Ruby replied. See Ruby 627 Dallas Morning News, Carl Freund. Ruby said he held his hand on his Colt Cobra pistol as he walked into the city basement. 3464, the state's first witness was Don Campbell, 46, an advertising salesman for the Dallas Morning News. Campbell said he and Ruby were talking about an advertisement for Ruby's 2 nightclubs up until about 10 minutes before the president was killed. Once again, Samuel Ruby, because Jack Ruby was out in the green pickup truck doing all the stuff, reference to the Knoll and whatnot. The witness said they talked from about 12 o'clock till 12:25 in the office of the Morning News. Campbell said that he read later in the newspapers that the president was assassinated at about 12:35 p.m. It was 12:30. So here's the thing. Okay, let me make the connection here and prove that it was Samuel Ruby. So when you go and you look at the footage of the Dallas Morning News that morning, I'm assuming at a time approximately 12:45. So you have Jack Ruby allegedly in the Dallas Morning News talking to Campbell, and that within 10 to 15 minutes, you have Jack Ruby walking into the frame of the live broadcast. And then he sits down and picks up the phone, and he talks on the phone. He's holding the phone with his left hand, and guess what? He has a left index finger, but Jack Ruby doesn't have a left index finger. Jack Ruby's left index finger got bit off in a bar fight. So, we know with 100% certainty, this person inside the fucking office, because they didn't switcheroo for 15 minutes before Samuel Ruby is then captured on film, right? So, we can definitely say with certainty this is Samuel Ruby the whole time, not Jack Ruby. Under cross-examination by Chief Defense Counsel Melvin Belli, Campbell said he left Ruby in the office, and so far as he knew, Ruby did not see the assassination because he was left in the office. 3564 Dallas. Officer D.R. Archer testified after the shooting. As we got him down on the floor, I heard Ruby say, "I hope I killed the son of a bitch." 3 to 5 minutes later, Archer continued. When he was inside the jail with Ruby, he told the defendant, "I think you killed him." He said, Archer added, "I intended to shoot him 3 times. During questioning of police officer L.O. Graves, walking alongside Oswald when Ruby shot him, Belli asked him at one point about Ruby's being in police headquarters at the time Oswald was shot. Quote, "There was no connection between Dallas police force and Ruby in his coming there that morning, was there?" "I don't know," Graves replied. "I don't believe it," Belli declared, "and I want it out of the case now." Personally, Graves said, there was no connection between me and Jack Ruby and his getting into that basement. Dallas policeman Thomas Gillen related fragments of conversation while Ruby was being taken in the elevator to the 5th floor of City Hall. He quoted a police captain as saying, took Ruby, quote, "Of all the low-life things that ever happened, this takes the cake. Why'd you do it?" He said Ruby's reply was, quote, "Somebody had to do it. Somebody had to do it. You guys couldn't." It's from the AP. 3564. The defense hopes to show that Ruby pulled the trigger with the middle finger rather than the index finger of his right hand, thus proving that the hand was in a state of spasm. But Lavelle refused to establish this basic defense point. It's true, because that's a mob technique. .3564 Dallas. Earlier, another Dallas policeman surprised the defense by testifying that he saw Ruby outside the county jail between 3:30 and 4 o'clock on 11/23. He said Ruby was in a crowd of spectators that was expecting to see Oswald transferred at that hour. By my calculations, that's Saturday. Ruby's in Galveston because he's seen it at a sporting goods store or a hardware store where he's buying or selling a gun. Weirdly, not the gun that he shot Oswald with, which is strange because that gun came from Joe Cody, who flew Oswald's plane back to fucking Shreveport on the night of the assassination. Weird, huh? Let me see. 3564 Dallas. Jack Ruby was quoted at his murder trial today as saying he marked Lee Harvey Oswald for death with 3 bullets because somebody had to do it. Quote, "I intended to shoot him 3 times. The police officer, T.D. McMillan, said Ruby told him after the single shot, last 11/24, cut down Oswald. At one point, Wade resumed direct examination of McMillan and asked him, quote, did the defendant, Jack Ruby, tell you how he got in the basement of the jail? Answer, I was present when Mr. Ruby stated how he got into the basement. He stated a lieutenant was pulling out of the basement in a squad car, and he just walked by an officer there in between the wall and the car and said someone called to him, but he just ducked his head and kept going. Bullshit. 3664, Dallas. When testimony was resumed, Captain Glenn King of the Dallas Police Department testified that Ruby said moments after he shot Oswald and was himself arrested, quote, "You didn't think I was going to let him get by with it, did you?" But King said he did not hear a remark attributed to Ruby by another officer yesterday, which was, quote, "Somebody had to do it. Somebody had to take care of it. You guys couldn't do it." Under cross-examination, King several times denied hearing this. King also denied that he heard Ruby say, quote, "I hope the son of a bitch dies." 3764, Dallas. Jack Ruby said he thought of killing Lee Oswald the night of November 22nd, the day President Kennedy was assassinated, a police sergeant testified today. Ruby made this statement on 11/24, only 10 minutes after killing Oswald, and gave two motives. Satric Patrick T. Dean testified. The 52-year-old nightclub operator wanted the world to know the Jews do have guts, the sergeant said Ruby told him. Also, Ruby said he disliked Oswald's sarcastic sneer at a midnight press conference at the city jail on 11/22, the witness said. (3764) Dallas. Story on jailbreak during Ruby trial. Little Lynn, waiting in the corridor, became hysterical when she saw a toy pistol in the hand of one of the prisoners. 9 months pregnant, she slumped to the floor screaming, "He's after me." Hang on a second. Who here knows why the fuck I'm pausing here? Who caught what I just caught? I'd say raise your hand, but I can't fucking see you. 3764, Dallas. Story on jailbreak during Ruby trial. Little Lynn, waiting in the corridor, became hysterical when she saw a toy pistol in the hand of one of the prisoners. 9 months pregnant, she slumped to the floor screaming, "He's after me." Okay, so I found another pregnant woman. This makes 5. 5 pregnant women in this story. Now, why am I looking for a pregnant woman? Because I'm still trying to identify the pregnant woman who met with Oswald in the Texas theater. It might have been a connection through New Orleans, through Perry Russo and Sandra Moffat. And in thinking about it now, 9 months prior to March 7th of 64, you're looking at like September would be 6, September, October. There's no way she would be an overly pregnant woman November 22nd, would she? Could Little Lynn, who absolutely was in Dealey Plaza that day, could she be the pregnant woman who met with Oswald at the theater? My only concern is that she's not overly visibly pregnant in November. I don't know. That's what, 4 months? Are you visibly pregnant at 5 months? I don't know. Interesting to take note of. But she revived and was able to take the witness stand after a delay of several minutes. 3764, Washington FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover said today Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack L. Ruby never served as confidential informants of the FBI. Hoover issued this statement, quote, "To set the record straight and to refute the misinformation." Oh my God, they were using that word back in the day too, huh? Hoover issued a statement to set the record straight and refute the misinformation which has been maliciously circulated. "I want to state unequivocally that Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack L. Ruby were never FBI informants, that they were never employed by this Bureau in any capacity, nor did they ever render any services for or receive any sums of money from the FBI. 31164, Dallas. One of the state rebuttal witnesses was Ira M. Walker, a slim engineer technician for Fort Worth television station WBAP. He testified he was sitting in his mobile truck unit outside the entrance to police headquarters sometime after 10:30 a.m. on November 24th. He said twice Ruby approached his truck and added, "I could only see his face at the window," and all he said was, "Have they brought him down yet?" He was asked by the defense, "Do you know who he was referring to?" "We were all waiting for Oswald to come down." But you don't know that he was referring to Oswald? No. 3/11/64. Jack Langdon's story from Dallas, dated 3/10, described Mrs. Marguerite Oswald's appearance at Ruby trial as spectator, her being sworn as witness to prevent her attending as a spectator. Ms. Oswald did not look at Ruby during her brief moment in the courtroom, and he did not seem to recognize her. 3/14/64, commenting on Hoover's denial, Lane asked, "Can we really expect the FBI to admit the truth if my client had been an agent?" That's Mark Lane. 3/14/64, Dallas Assistant District Attorney William F. Alexander led off in summing up the case late night of the 13th. He pointed out that at the time of Kennedy's motorcade in Dallas, Ruby was framing a newspaper advertisement for one of his nightclubs. Quote, "Here we have the picture of a man who professed love for his president to the extent that he would kill for him," Alexander cried. But he did not see fit to move from Dallas Morning News to see the parade. He wouldn't stir himself to walk 5 blocks to see the president. Kind of a contradiction there, huh? 3/14/64, Dallas Jack Ruby was condemned to death today in jury swift verdict, murder with malice. 3/14/64. The anniversary that's coming up, huh? The 60-year anniversary of Jack Ruby's death sentence is coming up. 3/14/64 also, Dallas, the brother of Jack Ruby, vowed to appeal the decision sentencing Ruby to death. "Jack's a sick man, said Earl Ruby. He needs treatment. He shouldn't be in this jail," Earl said. His brother asked him on Tuesday when the trial was going to start. "The trial had been going on for 3 weeks, said Earl. He's a sick man, I tell you." 3/14/64, Dallas defense lawyer said Jack Ruby assessed the death penalty earlier in the day, asked them tonight, quote, "Can you arrange for me through President Johnson to go to Washington and take a lie detector test so I can prove I didn't kill Oswald?" That's an interesting one. Of course he killed Oswald, right? Right? Take a lie detector test so I can prove I didn't kill Oswald. Interesting. Could Samuel Ruby have killed Oswald, and then behind the scenes they did the switcheroo? It's possible. Who knows? It's exhausting, isn't it? I'm fucking exhausted just thinking about it. All right, 3/15/64, Dallas. Ruby's lawyers meanwhile expressed fear for his life. Chief Defense Counsel Melvin Belli. Remember, Melvin Belli is the associate of fucking Mickey Cohen and those guys, right? And Menachem Begin. Ruby is worried, and so am I, that they may slip someone into his cell, another prisoner, with a shiv knife in order to prevent our appeal. Then they would make it appear as a suicide, and this vicious city would have him off their hands. 3/16/64, Dallas Police Sergeant P.T. Dean, who was responsible for security in the basement while Oswald was being transferred to the county jail, said Ruby told him later that, quote, "He had come in an entrance on the north side of Main Street as a car drove out. Someone had shouted to Ruby, but he kept his head down and kept walking," Sergeant Dean said. He quoted Ruby as telling him that he knew he could always pretend to be a reporter. It's funny because I thought he was there at the midnight press conference with 2 Jews that he said were reporters for Israeli newspapers. That no one's ever got to the bottom of. There was some suspicion that Yitzhak Shamir was one of those fucking reporters, but I don't remember who speculated that. But that needs some way more fucking investigation. The 2 Israeli reporters, allegedly, who accompanied Jack Ruby to fucking see Oswald. That is, God, that would be such utter proof of their hubris, wouldn't it? 3/16/64, Dallas Police Sergeant P.T. Dean, who was responsible for security in the basement while Oswald was being transferred out of the county jail, said Ruby told him later that he had come in an entrance on the north side of Main Street as a car drove out. Someone had shouted to Ruby, but he kept his head down and kept walking, Sergeant Dean said. He quoted Ruby as telling him that he knew he could always pretend to be a reporter. Sergeant Dean said he'd been asked by a superior to report on the break in security, but he did not testify as to why there was no guard at the jail entrance the moment Ruby walked in. 3/17/64, Dallas District Attorney Henry Wade was told yesterday how prosecutors made the big decision of the Jack Ruby murder trial. The decision they would not call witnesses who swore they saw Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald together before a sniper assassinated President Kennedy here. Wade said FBI agents and other investigators provided him with a list of witnesses who insisted they had seen Ruby and Oswald together at various times. The district attorney said he decided not to call these witnesses because he had doubts about the accuracy of their statements. Quote, I knew that 3 of them had failed lie detector tests, Wade said. We knew testimony from these witnesses could have had a big impact on the jury one way or another. But I felt then and still do that there has been no proof Ruby and Oswald knew each other. It's from the AP. 321-64, the commission is also expected to inquire into speculation that Ruby and Oswald were acquainted, a persistent rumor in Dallas, even among some police officials, despite denials by District Attorney Henry Wade and the FBI. A New York Times reporter noted, 315, quote, some law enforcement officials in Dallas continue to believe that a connection was possible, but if so, that it was personal and did not necessarily involve the assassination. National Guardian. Well, of course, the relationships in Dallas with Jack Ruby and Oswald were most certainly William Seymour and Kerry Thornley, or a combination of the two. 4464 in Dallas, Thomas Buchanan looked into the theory that Ruby might have been the assassin on the bridge. Buchanan has theorized that the assassination involved a plot by several persons. In any case, Ruby alone in the Dallas Morning News building just before the crime and was also there a few minutes after it. No one saw him in the interim. Buchanan had already noted that it is a 2.5-minute run from the bridge to the newspaper office. Neither Ruby's lawyer nor prosecutor Wade probed at the trial into whether or not Ruby showed signs of recent physical effort when the newspaper's employees returned to the building on the assassination day. 4664, and Ruby's act of vengeance stirred the deepest suspicion of all. A Lewis Harris poll showed that fully 40% of the U.S. public still believes there was some link between the two. That's from Newsweek. JFK's murder, sowers of doubt. 417-64, Dallas, after visiting Ruby today in his jail cell, Tannehill, it should be Jonah Tannehill, wrote a newsman. Quote, Jack is eager to appear before the commission either in Dallas or in Washington. .424-64, Dallas, riot in the county jail, which Sheriff Bill Decker attributed to overcrowding. The jail is the same which houses convicted slayer Jack Ruby, but Ruby was not on the same floor as the riots, the sheriff said. Jack's rest was not disturbed. 425-64, Dallas, at every meeting at the county jail, Ruby passes notes to his sister, asking that she arrange a meeting for him with federal commission headed by Chief Justice Earl Warren. His legal counsel believes, however, that Ruby is so unstable that he could not give a useful statement to the commission. Oh, my God. Cover up in action. General tenor of the story is that after 5 months of isolated confinement, Ruby shows signs of severe delusions, according to persons who see him daily. New York Times, Jack Languth. 425-64, Dallas, Ruby's sister, Mrs. Eva Grant, says that he constantly expressed the fear that an attempt might be made on her life. General tenor of the story is that after 5 months of isolated confinement, Ruby shows signs of severe delusions. Again. 425-64, Dallas, 424. Sheriff Bill Decker announced after the trial that Ruby would be transferred to a cell with other prisoners. The sheriff said that the company might lift Ruby's spirits. But members of his family protested to the Federal Bureau of Investigation that Ruby's life could be endangered by the move. As a result, Ruby remains in separate quarters. 426-64. Dallas condemned slayer Jack Ruby took advantage of his jailer's momentary absence early today to ram his head into the wall of his cell in what Sheriff Bill Decker called a deliberate act. Apparently, he suffered only a knot on his head. 429-64, Dallas Judge Joe B. Brown overruled today Jack Ruby's motion for a new trial. Defense lawyers immediately gave notice of appeal to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Twice today, as he was led from the courtroom back to jail, he whispered to his brothers and sisters, "Goodbye, I'm not coming back." His kin could not explain the statements. 429-64. Dallas, the hearing today was confined to the original defense motion for a new trial. A second motion filed late yesterday was not admitted for consideration. Tannehill and Phil Burleson called 3 witnesses they said would prove with concrete evidence that Dallas police officer P.T. Dean gave false testimony at the month-long trial. As Brown declined to hear the witness, Tannehill rose to his feet, extended his arms, and said, "For God's sake, do your duty, Judge, and hear this testimony." The state said such testimony was not set out in the motion for a new trial and thus was not material to the hearing. Tannehill tried to call Ray Hall, an FBI agent, and Officer Dean himself to the stand, but was not allowed to. He said Hall would impeach Dean's testimony. 564. It is interesting to recall the story of Jim Lehrer in the Dallas Times-Herald of 12/20/63 that Ruby had made 5 reservations on a plane leaving for Mexico. Were tickets found in the apartment? Buchanan, who killed Kennedy. 564. It is interesting to recall the story of Jim Lehrer in the Dallas Times-Herald. Oh, there's another duplication. Is there anything different here? No, the only thing different is a see Ruby 10/7/64 London Evening Standard. So a better reference. 5964, Guardian account of the story in 5/17/64 issue. Issue of National Enquirer, which the Guardian carefully labels a weekly with sensationalist leanings to the effect that Ruby and Oswald were said to be suspects when General Walker was shot at. Justice Department wrote to Chief Jesse Curry asking they not be arrested for reasons of state, making the request on behalf of the CIA. Because the CIA was deeply involved with Ruby and Oswald too. CIA agents had been using Ruby to recruit men in the Dallas area to serve as commandos against Castro's government in Cuba. And they didn't dare let Ruby be arrested and chance such information getting out. There were also indications that Oswald himself might have been working as a double agent for both the communists and the CIA. And that's from the National Enquirer and the National Guardian. 528/64, Dallas. Jack Ruby went berserk in his Dallas County jail cell and was subdued by a jailer, Sheriff Bill Decker said. The sheriff said Ruby, 53, broke his eyeglasses, grabbed a cuspidor, and threw it at a light bulb, breaking the light fixture. It was the second incident in which Ruby has become unruly in the county jail cell. The first incident was a few weeks ago when Ruby butted his head against a wall and superficially injured himself. 62/64, Dallas. A 619 show cause hearing in open court has been scheduled to determine whether Jack Ruby gets a sanity trial. Meanwhile, the condemned slayer is receiving psychiatric treatment in his jail cell. If Ruby, is not in better health by 619, then a sanity trial will begin on 7/6, Brown said. June 3rd, 64, Dallas. Jack Ruby has refused to take his pills prescribed by psychiatrists to begin treatment for his mental condition, a source close to his family revealed today. Jack won't take his medicine, this source told the Dallas Times-Herald. His family is very upset because he tells them someone is trying to poison him with the pills. Since Ruby banged his head against the jail cell wall in April, jailers have caught him stripping cloth from his jail uniform in an attempt to fashion a crude noose. 64/64, Dallas. Jack Ruby's taking some of the medication prescribed to him by his psychiatrist, Dallas County medical authorities have said. 68/64, Dallas. Chief Justice Earl Warren spent more than 3 hours yesterday with condemned slayer Jack Ruby in the Dallas County Jail. It is believed that Warren's visit with Ruby was unprecedented in that no Chief Justice ever before had visited a jail to take testimony from a prisoner. Defense lawyer Joe Tannehill said Ruby and Warren shook hands at the beginning and end of the meeting. He said Ruby responded to questions. However, the lawyer said Ruby didn't answer intelligently. He said he was wild-eyed. I wasn't all pleased with how Jack performed, Tannehill said. 6/11/64, Dallas. Jack Ruby's new chief counsel says he plans to withdraw a request for sanity hearing in order to concentrate on appeals for a new trial. Clayton Fowler, who took over as Ruby's 5th head lawyer this week, said yesterday he decided on the change in strategy because a sanity hearing is now premature. 6/13/64, it is known that 10 persons have signed sworn depositions to the commission that they knew Oswald and Ruby to have been acquainted. The commission has said, however, the lie detector tests have proven the witnesses unreliable. Oddly, no action has been contemplated against those 10 whose sworn testimony would certainly merit such action if needed if they were lying. Among the 10, according to the Herald Tribune, were a Dallas attorney and a waitress who claimed she had once served Oswald and Ruby as they sat together in a restaurant. National Guardian. 6/16/64, Judge Joe Brown today granted a request by Jack Ruby's defense lawyers to indefinitely postpone a motion for sanity hearing. 6/19/64, Dallas attorneys for Jack Ruby said today they will seek immediate local hospitalization for treatment of his mental condition following a sudden examination by an Oklahoma psychiatrist. The announcement by Fowler came after Dr. Lewis Jolly West, right? The announcement came by Fowler after Dr. Jolly West flew to Dallas today under what county jail attendants said were emergency circumstances to examine Ruby in his cell. The Dallas Times-Herald said one source indicated Ruby's mental condition has deteriorated since 6/7 visit to Chief Justice Earl Warren. I can't say what the purpose of Dr. West's visit is until after completion of the examination, the attorney said, but I will tell you that Dr. West's visit was hastened by a telephone call to him from the defense. Fowler said Ruby had become incoherent. 6/20/64, Dallas. Clayton Fowler said that Ruby had become so incoherent that, quote, we can't communicate with our client at all. Since Earl Warren visited Ruby at the jail June 7th, Mr. Fowler said Ruby has not been able to communicate realistically with his attorneys. 6/22/64, Dallas. Superintendent of Rusk State Hospital questioned today whether it could be accepted that Jack Ruby as a patient under the present circumstances. If we were asked to take him, we would want a legal opinion, says Charles Kastner. Clayton Fowler suggested Parkland Hospital as a place where Ruby could get treatment while held under guard, but Judge Brown said earlier that Parkland officials have told him at least twice they don't want Ruby as a patient. Judge Brown said the officials told him that Parkland lacks facilities for keeping Ruby under guard. He might prove a disrupting influence, and he doesn't qualify for admission. The Rusk Hospital has facilities. It houses the criminally insane. Another defense lawyer, Phil Burleson, said he believed hospitals would accept Ruby if Judge Brown requested they do so. 6/27/64, Dallas. Ruby's taken only one tranquilizer pill in the last month and has refused prescription medication. Dallas, story on Ruby's interview with Chief Justice Warren on 6/7. Another member of the commission, Representative Gerald Ford of Michigan, and its chief counsel, J. Lee Rankin, also came here for the interview with Ruby. Ruby said mainly he wanted to sacrifice himself to spare Jackie Kennedy further anguish. Also, Ruby said he was planning to shoot Oswald when he drove from his apartment to downtown Dallas and walked into the City Hall basement on November 24th. Ruby told Warren, however, that he drove downtown for a double purpose, the wire and the other. As he had done previously, Ruby insisted he was not part of any conspiracy. And he said he had never seen Oswald before he lunged forward and shot the assassin suspect while millions watched on television. I think that's very possible. I do not belong to any subversive organizations, and no communists told me to shoot Ruby. Told me to shoot him, Ruby said. And I didn't get any orders from anybody in the underworld. Ruby said that's false. He got the order from Al Gruber. Ruby said at one point that he was a victim of a plot. The meaning of this statement was not clear, but the slayer may have meant that he believes he was sentenced to die because of criticism which Dallas received after his assassination. Ruby emphasized that he did not sneak into the basement. I walked in, he said, adding that he strode past officers who were conferring. These are the quotes as recalled by the informed source who told the news about Ruby's statements. He says Ruby may have used slightly different words, but the quotes are substantially correct. 6/27/64, story on Earl Warren's interview of Ruby in Dallas in June. The informed source said Ruby may have used slightly different words, but the quotes were substantially correct. Ruby said he held his hand on his Colt Cobra pistol as he walked into City Hall basement. See Ruby 3-4, Dallas Morning News, John Rutledge describing how Ruby passed through police guards. Ruby was writing on a piece of paper, as would a reporter. Dallas Morning News, Carl Freund. 6/27/64, Dallas. Condemned slayer Jack Ruby reportedly asked for a lie detector test and was promised one by Earl Warren during the recent visit here by the Chief Justice. And that was from the Dallas Times-Herald. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for today. We're about halfway through this document, and so we're going to pick the rest up tomorrow, which should be Tuesday. And that's gonna be all. So if you haven't picked up the book, please go pick up the book. The book is getting pretty amazing reviews. I'm very proud of it. I think it's one of the best books ever written on Kennedy, and I hope that you will pick it up and agree with me. So until tomorrow, thank you, everybody.